Sawyer County Judge John Yackel is my guest today, Wednesday, April 1st, 2020. Although it feels, I think, at this point, more like March 73rd. I'm Ben Dryden. You're watching DrydenWire Live. Special thank you to my guests so far this week, mental health professional Darren Cox and Barron County Sheriff Chris Fitzgerald. Tomorrow's Spooner Superintendent Dr. David Haslam will be my guest as we talk about the proposed referendum coming up on Tuesday. Also going to see if we can get a little inside information on when the frick we can get the kids back to school. Don't know if he's going to be able to share any of that stuff, but we're going to ask. Then on Friday, I'll be joined by my very special guest, the first timer on DrydenWire Live. We're probably going to announce that on tomorrow's show. I don't know. Maybe we'll end up even announcing it today. I'm not sure. Reminder, you can watch all of our live chats on Facebook at 8:30 a.m. or a recording of the chats on our website or on our YouTube channel by noon each day. All right, let's see if we can bring in our guest today. There he is, Sawyer County Judge John Yackel. John, how are you?
Morning, Ben. Doing great.
Looks like just look at your background there. So you refurnished your office. You redecorated.
Oh, I'm coming at you live from home.
Live from nice social distancing,
yep.
Brother.
That's right. That's right. Just to let everyone know out there, I am working. I am on the clock. But today we're doing a dry run with the technology. With the Supreme Court's order, we have to be prepared to do everything by using technology. So normally I'm in the courtroom, and my court reporter and my staff and everyone else is usually calling in by video or by telephone. But today is our dry run to see if I can do this from my home, so we actually don't have anybody in contact with anything. So I decided to do this with you from my home today.
Oh, very nice. What program are you guys using? I'm assuming Zoom, because everybody's using Zoom.
The state of Wisconsin is giving us licenses. Every state or every county licenses for Zoom. So yes.
No, I didn't know you get licenses for it. I just thought, you pay, or I think it's free, actually, I thought. How are you getting a license?
Well, there's a free aspect to it, but the licensure lets us tap into our Polycom system, which is in the courtroom.
You got to have the Polycom.
It's got more features and is more reliable.
You got it. Are you anticipating then that is going to be a likelihood? Or this is just, it probably isn't, but let's just be safe?
I'm refraining from making any type of prediction, because 2 or 3 weeks ago, I would never have guessed that we'd be in this situation.
Yeah.
So here.
Yeah, it's escalated quickly. That's for sure. So we had Chris Fitzgerald on yesterday, the Barron County Sheriff, and we had talked to him about the fact that crime seems to be down, or at least arrests are down, because a lot of people are at home. Are you noticing less cases being brought to the court system right now in Sawyer County because of this?
Well, based upon what the Supreme Court order was, is that all jury trials are suspended to at least to May 22nd. All in-court proceedings are suspended, and so basically all non-essential cases are to be rescheduled out. So that really, we're dealing with only the cases that individuals are in custody right now, and we're trying to do that by video conferencing as possible. As far as current crime goes, we're still having that. We're still having an influx of crime. I would say that it's down somewhat, but it's not that it's crime that is down. It's the law enforcement's response to it, because they're stretched so thin. They only have limited resources, and now on top of everything else, they're dealing with all these different types of complaints about social distancing and people not following the governor's order. I don't think that they're really enforcing it, but let's just put it this way. Everything is in flux now as to what we're doing. They're not enforcing misdemeanor warrants. They're not bringing people in on misdemeanor crimes and booking and releasing. I think they're just giving them they're sending reports to the DA's office so that the DA at some point in the future can decide whether or not to charge. So the way we're dealing with the system is dramatically different. We're putting people on signature bonds so that the jail has requested that we don't put anybody in custody unless we absolutely have to, because of getting the virus into the jail system. We're trying to do all kinds of different things and be as flexible as possible. So it is having a dramatic impact on the system. We're rescheduling all of these cases out into the summer, And so we had a real problem with our backlog of cases because we're the busiest court system in the entire state. And now this is just making the situation that much worse, because come summer, what we did have as a backlog, it's going to be double, triple,
Oh,
who knows.
right. So that's like a credit card. It makes everything easier right now, but at some point you got to pay the bills. So you're saying that you're going to have to push all these things off, but we still have to do them, and then we're going to be back to our normal. I don't know what you call it, normal amount of
Payday. It's
yeah,
payday.
yeah. It's exactly. No, real quick, you had said
$1,000 limit on your credit card, and you start spending. Everything's great.
yeah.
All of a sudden, you hit your limit. Now you got to start paying it back,
Yeah.
and it's going to be tough.
So you had said that signature bond for everyone. When you say everyone,
For everyone, but generally a lot more emphasis on it because of we're just forced into that situation. I mean, it's one thing to force a system that is running slowly and trying to do what is right, and now you're trying to balance the healthcare crisis, this COVID-19, with the rights of the public, the rights of the defendant, and it took a very difficult situation, and it's not just Sawyer County. I mean, every county is going through this, but we're struggling with it. I mean, it's new normal, at least at this point, and we're trying to figure out what it looks like.
Sure. You had last time you were on, there was the judge, governor had passed something, or the legislature did, and he signed it. Skipping. You're getting another judge then or not?
On March 5th, the governor signed into law the bill which authorized 12 new judgeships in the state of Wisconsin.
Yeah, and I saw Sawyer was on there.
Sawyer was on there. The names of the counties were silent in the bill, but the director of state courts, which has the authority under the bill to name the counties, put out a memorandum which basically said, here's the first four, here's the second four, here's the third four. And the first four are the counties that have the ability to accommodate the space right now. The second four are the ones that are actually building something to accommodate the space. And the final four are the ones who have said they're going to, but they haven't really started yet. And so it's each year.
Are you in the final four?
We're in the final four. And he made clear that if we can't make the space accommodate for the space, they're going to look somewhere else, and we're not going to get one.
And where is the?
So,
I'm sorry. I had a little audio issue here. Where's the process right now then in terms of getting the courtroom to make it to be able to get another judge?
You'll have to ask the county board. I know that they were going to address it at the end of March, but a little thing named COVID-19 has now popped up and directed everyone's attention to something else. So all I can say is if the county board lets this slide by without even addressing it, we're going to lose our chance once in a 15-year opportunity to really take the resources that Madison's offering to us. It is one of those things where the county has to expend resources in order to get them. But with this COVID-19, this is going to make everything that much worse. It's going to this is what it's going to be like, I project, in a couple of years without a COVID-19 crisis if we do nothing. Right now, the governor has suspended all foreclosure actions and all eviction actions. And, so if you're a landlord, you're going to have a difficult time getting into court. If you are a bank and there's a foreclosure, all these things that the general, some would say that's a good thing, but obviously if your banks start failing and everything else, it just is like a snowball going down the hill.
Sure.
Eventually it's going to affect divorces. It's going to affect all kinds of access that the public may have into the court system. Right now it's difficult to get in. It's going to be that much worse.
Well, you solve one problem, but you may create another one. And it doesn't mean that you don't do it, but you have to understand that there are going to be some other problems that arise from these decisions.
Yeah, absolutely.
What else is going on up in Sawyer County? Wait, hold on a second. I forgot. I wrote this down. You had said that the county board is kind of looking at this, and Evers, you signed that bill for the final four. But How much does that mean? What does that actually mean? Is the county just looking at they just have to provide the facility, and then the judge is then going to be paid for by the state?
The judge is paid for by the state, and the court reporter is paid for by the state. They have to provide a facility that the state basically sanctions.
Okay.
So the county just can't say, here's a little tiny closet to put the judge and the court reporter in. State has to come in and say, this is what we recommend. And there are guidelines that the state provides as to what is an acceptable courtroom.
Okay.
Right now, the county doesn't have that space that the state sanctions. So if we want to get that second judge, then we need to build what the state will sanction as far as a second courtroom.
And when do you think, if this is going to be that final four, I'm sure it's going to take a while to build or to produce this second thing.
My understanding is that the building must be started by November of 2020. So the county board this fall, because they said it's going to take 2.5 years to build, and it has to be completed by May 31st of 2023. That is the deadline for the facility to be completed. And if it's completed, we're awarded the second judge, and that judge would then take office on August 1st, 2023.
Got it. All right, cool. What else is going on up in Sawyer County? What are you doing now with the COVID stuff? I know you're working from home right now this morning, testing out Zoom and other things, but for the last week and a half, what's been happening in the courthouse?
I would say last week was probably one of the more stressful weeks I've ever had as a judge. Just not understanding what the Supreme Court wanted us to do, because everything was implemented piecemeal. At first, all the individual counties were making decisions. Do we cancel some jury trials? How far do we cancel them out? What are we going to do with this caseload? So a couple weeks ago, I canceled all jury trials up until, I think, April 30th in Sawyer County, and took them off the calendar so that we didn't have people, a jam-packed courtroom full of people. And then all of a sudden, some other counties were doing May 15th and June 30th and all these other things. And then finally, the Supreme Court came down with its order that all jury trials are to be suspended until May 22nd.
Okay. So you could make a decision as a judge for your own county, or judges could if they have. I don't know how that works if you have multiple judges. But when the Supreme Court comes down and says something, then that trumps everything. But you could make those decisions before, if you're saying that some places had May 15th was theirs, not April 30th.
If you had an order that went beyond May 22nd, the Supreme Court order doesn't trump it. But if I have an order that's shorter than May 22nd or sooner than May 22nd, then the Supreme Court order trumps that.
I get it now.
So right now, May 22nd is the operating date. We'll see if they change that or if it moves. As you know, things can be very fluid in this type of situation.
Yeah. Is everyone else in Sawyer County kind of working from home now too?
The clerks are still there, at least some of them. I think there's some working from home, but they're calling in from their desks. So we're trying to limit the social interaction within the court system. I know that they do have the ability to work from home. My judicial assistant is working from home. My court reporter is working from home. And so up until today, I have been in the courtroom. And if you look on my Facebook post, I think it's public. You can search for John Yackel, and you'll see a picture of the courtroom yesterday that I was having a calendar and having court cases, but it was an empty courtroom. So they were coming in on the video conferencing or on the conference bridge. And my court reporter is listening to everything over the telephone and taking the record. The judicial assistant is listening in for scheduling purposes and things like that. So we're trying to maximize technology to the fullest extent. And early on in my term, in 2015, 2016, we had such a complete outdated system for video conferencing. And I pushed the county board to really upgrade that because we really needed to use the technology. They did. They spend a lot of money on the system. They use it for themselves, for the county board, so it's not just all for the court system. There was a dual purpose involved. Sure. Thank God we did. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the ability to do what we're doing right now, and we would make a bad situation even worse.
Yeah. Are there things, we've asked our last two guests, that you are kind of being, well, obviously work from home, getting Zoom stuff set up now, that you're being forced to do right now, that when this is all said and done in whatever, that you may start implementing some of these things or using some of these technologies or your processes, your standard operating procedures, that this is actually going to make it a little easier?
I think the answer to you, the short answer is yes. I think that there are things that we're doing now because we're forced to, that when this all settles down, we can look back at what we've done and what we've learned to do and say, how can we implement some of that into our normal operating procedure to become even more efficient?
Sure.
So yeah, there's definitely going to be that conversation as to what we can do to become more efficient. I think this is a situation now where if my court reporter is, let's say, on vacation or a day or two off, and we have like one hearing that we need to get on the calendar, and it costs too much money for the district to bring in another court reporter, we could have her appear, by telephone and do the hearing, or we could have another floater court reporter within the district call in and just do that over telephone. Now we're used to doing it.
Nice.
Whereas before, they always wanted an in-person hearing. They wanted the court reporter there. Yeah. But now, for the last week and a half, my court reporter hasn't been to work. I mean, she's working, right, but she hasn't been to work. So she's been doing it all by telephone. Well, and it's been working out pretty good.
Well, you say that she has been working. Sure. She's probably got Netflix on and...
Yeah, probably true. Yeah, maybe she's. I don't know. But what I mean.
Yeah. So I know that you had.
My judicial assistant, which is basically my secretary, they're having IT, the technology guys at the county are having if you call the courthouse, my office, the call will be forwarded to her cell phone, and so she's got a desktop at home. And she can log into her computer system and basically do what she's doing from home as well. So what we're forced to do, I think, will help us become more efficient in the future. That doesn't eliminate any problems that we may have, but it certainly helps at the margins and assures everybody that we're doing everything we possibly can to make a dollar stretch as far as we can and be as economically efficient as possible.
Yeah. We have a question here from June Korn. I think. And I'm just kind of curious about your thoughts on this. It is, what about April 7th? How do poll workers stay safe? Ideas? What are your thoughts on the April 7th election? I know this, it's not you're a judge, but you're, a politician. You got to run for something. What are your thoughts on the April 7th election?
I first of all want to thank all the people on all the townships and all the polling places who are working, the clerks, everybody involved with that. I think they're going to do a great job. I know that I'm friends with some on Facebook here in Sawyer County, and I know that they've been talking about it and some of the concerns that they may have, and maybe it would have been better had the governor pushed the election back. He hasn't done that. They're going to go through with it now, and I think that you've seen, at least in Sawyer County, a lot of people stepping up to really volunteer. I'm assuming that they're going to be wearing masks and gloves and trying to keep themselves as safe as possible. We can't stop our democracy simply because of a virus. Yeah. I mean, I'm torn in both directions. I'm torn with what the Supreme Court has done. They've suspended basically the right to speedy trial demands, and I get why they did it, and I understand they're doing it from the idea of that wanting to keep people safe. But then I'm torn in the other direction of how can you suspend the Constitution just simply because there's an emergency? Well, the Constitution was created in an emergency, and that's what makes the Constitution so great, is that in an emergency, it is solid. It is there. It's something we can rely on. So there's degrees to with what we're doing. I think we can put up with a little bit of it for a while, but there's got to come a point where we've got to say, you know what, we can't keep doing this. It's like shutting down the economy. Okay, I understand why we've done that, but it can't go on forever. And so there's a reasonableness involved here to at which point we've got to get back to our daily life, whether or not there's a risk or there's not. Mm-hmm. I get what we're doing. We're trying to suppress it and, like as they say, keep that curve rather than a peak. but that's beyond my pay grade. So those are just some opinions of somebody who's looking at it like everybody else.
Yeah. A month ago, I think, or so, you and I were talking, and it happened to come up about just the topic of social media. I think specifically Facebook. You know, we would put something on DrydenWire, a signature bond, a cash bond, or something. And I know that you and I had spoken about that at great length, actually, regarding still this misunderstanding in the community about how this process really works. Now, I know that we're in the shutdown mode right now, but maybe now wouldn't be a bad time to kind of bring that up again in the normal, when we get back to normal, to maybe kind of re-educate people on how this actually works.
Okay. All right. I'm
Here
like
we
everybody else. I look at DrydenWire and I see comments, especially when you comment on, what a judge in Sawyer County does, or a judge in Washburn, or a judge in Burnett. And I read the comments, and, this is a complex system. Our legal system is fairly complex. And I would just urge everybody to try and educate yourself a little bit more. I've always been a big advocate in trying to help people understand what's going on. I'm always open to answer questions, generally speaking, about the legal system. I can't comment on any active specific case. But as far as how something works, absolutely, I want to talk about that. And so let's talk about bonds, signature bonds, cash bonds.
Okay.
The one thing that everybody needs to understand is that when somebody gets arrested, and let's say they're charged with a horrific crime like sexual assault of a child, that person is innocent until proven guilty, or at least is given the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. And so when a judge sets a bond, whether it's a signature bond on that case or a $100,000 cash bond, I see people comment and they say, that's it?
Yeah,
that's all? They get a slap on the hand, or what's going on here? Whoa.
It's never enough.
They haven't tried the case yet. We don't have all the evidence. We don't know if it's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And then you could take a look at it. So if a judge then sentences a convicted person of that crime and then gives them probation or 2 years or 5 years, be critical of that all you want. But setting bond, here's what a judge has to do in setting bond. The judge has to take a look at, first of all, the severity of the crime, how strong the facts are in the limited information that the judge has. And it's usually only a page or a couple of paragraphs. And to make a split, seen this case before, I'm reading it and trying to get and rely on law enforcement. If you've got law enforcement who writes a good report, everything that you need is in there. If you've got law enforcement that writes a bad report, you're kind of, stabbing in the dark as to what's happening. You're oftentimes dealing with children, so you look to see if there's stepwise interviews or forensic interviews of individuals, and did they do it properly? So many different factors come into it. The first requirement of setting bond is to assure appearance in court. So that's number one. But in considering that, you have to take into account the severity of the crime, the protection of the public, the potential penalty that they're facing. So that's why on these severe crimes, you do see, $10,000, $25,000, $50,000, $100,000 cash bond, $250,000. I mean, there was a sexual assault case that I am no longer on, so that's why I'm going to comment on it. I set the bond in that case, and I believe I set it at $250,000. And the reason I did that so high was that the information from the alleged victims seemed to be pretty descriptive and believable. And the guy basically, at least from the viewpoint of what the probable cause statement said, admitted to it. And so, well, you admitted to it, now that doesn't mean that he's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. What that just means is that for purposes of setting bond, it's going to be really high. Now, you say, well, he admitted to it. Why do we have to have a trial? Because, there has to be our procedures in the United States of America under our Constitution requires due process. So even if I admit to the cops I committed a crime, I'm still entitled to that same due process as everybody else. And I said to the cops, I did it. Now I'm pleading not guilty. The state still has to prove me guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. That due process is what protects the innocent. Because the worst person in the whole world who commits the worst crime still is entitled to due process under our Constitution. In giving that due process to the worst of us, it ensures our protection for the innocent. So if I'm accused falsely of a crime, I am assured that I am going to go through that same process, and hopefully the process will show that I am innocent, that I'm not guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, and that I'll go. So the system tolerates one guilty person going free as opposed to one innocent person being incarcerated. So it's not a perfect system, but that's the theory behind it.
Okay, so this one I've always actually wondered about is there's similar cases. Obviously, each case is different. But if you take, we'll just say the one that you had used, sexual assault of a child, admits to it, gets one county or one judge, I should say, a $5,000 signature bond, another judge, a $100,000 signature bond. Now, granted, there would be different cases. I think that has been confusing to a lot of people. So is that because of what you were saying, that it depends all on those documents that you receive? There's a lot of factors here. But I think there's sometimes, too, there just has to be. I think some are just harder on some people than others, as in judges. And I don't know if that's a good thing. I don't know if that's a bad thing. But, I mean, there's a huge difference in some of these bonds.
I can tell you, as a judge, when you're sitting there and you have a prosecutor making a recommendation and you have a defense attorney making a recommendation and there's nobody else in the courtroom and the public isn't paying attention to it, there's no reporters there, it is hard to, let's say, I mean, if I go against what the state and the defense recommend too often, I can destroy the system and make it so non-functional. I have to follow plea agreements. I have to follow all these things. Even though I don't have to, I have to. Because if I want to keep the system running, I have to.
Sure.
And so there are a lot of times where people say, oh, these plea agreements, why do we do them? The plea agreements are necessary. Otherwise, our system would shut down because we don't have enough resources to have jury trials for everybody. The plea agreements are necessary. Going back to your point, why do some judges put in a $10,000 cash bond? Why do put $250,000? Well, you're right. Every case is different. And too much of the time, the public just looks at what the charge is and says, well, they're guilty. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been charged. You know, I get that as long as you understand that the people in the system can't look at it the same way the general public does. I have to look at it as this person is charged with this. He's not convicted. He's charged. He has the right to have an attorney. He has the right to have a jury trial. He has the right, all these rights. And that's my job, is to protect his constitutional rights and to make sure that the system is fair and as objective as possible and that he's given a fair trial or fair due process.
I don't, hold on a second. So I don't know if this was the case, but we did a story a couple of months ago. I don't know. It could have been 4 months ago. And I don't know if it was the one with that $250,000 cash bond that you're just talking about, or signature, or what it was, cash bond, or for some reason I'm just thinking the one with $100,000.
Yep.
But you were no longer on the case. You had set the bond, and then another judge then reduced it. And I wish I could remember the details. My other computer isn't up right now. I don't know if you're on that case, but that would be an example of why did one judge? That's the same case. That doesn't make sense. I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me at all.
All right. Well, all I can say is this, is that the cases that I'm on, I set the bond, we go through it. I mean, everybody, first of all, your readers or your listeners might be confused as to why in Sawyer County, a one-judge county, why is there another judge involved? I have the biggest caseload in the entire state. We need a second judge. The 10th District, their administrative decision is that they are taking about 15 or 20% of my felony caseload and assigning it to a different judge to try and alleviate some of the stress that it puts on the system for Sawyer County. And so that's why this is the cases that we're talking about where I set a bond and now it's no longer my case. It's because of that administrative transfer. It's not for any other reason other than, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oop, that one goes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oop, that one goes. And those just happen to be the ones that got assigned to a different judge. Why a judge would lower a bond that a different judge stated? All I can say to you is that I'm not here to second guess any other judge or what their decision is. They look at it differently. The answer to what your question is that what is you have different types of cases, different types of facts, and you have different judges. I mean, we're human beings. One judge might look at possession of meth as more serious than an OWI offense or vice versa. And I'm really going to hammer these cases, or I'm going to let these ones slide by. I know that a judge in the past had a child that was a drug addict. And so they looked at drug addicts as more of a, hey, you know what? We shouldn't be in the criminal justice system. They need treatment, not any type of incarceration. And then I know other judges who will say, you know what? The only way that they're going to stop is if they get sober in jail for a period of time, and then we put them in. So it's different philosophies. It's different viewpoints. It's different judges. So it does matter when you look at, depending on what your viewpoint is, if you're a citizen and you're not involved in the legal system very much, what does your judge believe? What kind of sentences does your judge put out? Does he send people to prison? Does he put everybody on probation? But then you also have to look at the system too. There are lots of cases where I would have probably thought that it was a prison case, but because the state and the defense attorney recommended a probation case, I went with the probation. And people say, why do you do that? Why do you have to go with plea agreements? Here's the answer. We are so overloaded that if they come to me on an average case where it could require a 3-year prison sentence, or we could do probation, and it's up in the air, and the defense attorney and the prosecutor come together and say, you know what, let's do 3 years probation or 5 years probation and avoid a prison sentence. If I don't follow that agreement, then the defense attorney, in trying to negotiate with the DA, is going to say, I don't care, your offer is reasonable, Mr. Prosecutor or Mrs. Prosecutor, but I can't take it because I don't think Judge Yackel is going to follow the agreement. And so we're just going to set this for trial because Yackel never follows the agreements. And so all these defense attorneys are just going to stop negotiating with the DA, and everything is going to be set for trial. In order to keep these cases processing and moving through, you have to follow the plea agreements, even though you don't.
Yeah.
It's my job to keep the system running. And in a system where the county board is hesitant, and so this is what's going to happen if we don't get a second judge. The backlog is going to get worse and worse, and my window of opportunity in order to look at a case and say, you know what, I disagree with this recommendation, I'm going to go either lighter or I'm going to go heavier, that opportunity becomes narrower and narrower the more burdensome the system gets. I see. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay. So, it's a complex system. I get why people go, oh, you know what? They only get a little tiny bond, or, why did this person get probation? Why is that? How is that fair? Come in, talk to me, send me a message on Facebook. I'll do everything I possibly can to answer your questions. Call my office on the phone. I'll try to set up a conference call with you. If you've got a question, ask, and I will certainly try and answer it as best I can, as long as it's not about any specific case.
Well, sure. Well, John, thank you so very much. Is there something else you want to discuss that we didn't get a chance to bring up?
Other than I'm very proud of all the people in Sawyer County in the court system, law enforcement, the jail, the DA's office. They're working under unusual times, and they're really doing a great job. To the people who, are going to be critical of the system when this blows over, about being called for jury duty, about trying to get access to the court system, all I can say is that you have a system in Sawyer County that has been working 110% over the last several years of these huge caseloads, and we are operating efficiently. We're trying to learn new and more efficient ways to operate. We care about the amount of money that is spent in the court system. We're asking that some more money be spent on it. But that is, I hope that everyone is understanding of the fact that we are running as efficiently as we can at this point, and we're trying to find even newer and more efficient ways to operate to save that tax dollar. I live in this community. I don't want my taxes to go up, but if I know they're going up for a specific purpose, if it's for public safety, so that my home is secure, that people aren't going to be burglarizing my home to try and get drug money. I would rather live in that community where we live, where we're secure in our homes rather than it being a free-for-all.
I didn't look this morning. Excuse me. What's your felony case number up to so far this year? Do you happen to know off the top of your head?
I haven't looked, but I can tell you that I guess there's one thing that I do want to bring up. One of the county board members, in the question of the second judge, came to me and asked me to basically run some numbers, because Sawyer County has had an out-of-county expense over the last several years, because our jail houses X number of people, and for a lot of times we have prisoners being housed outside of county. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So if our jail's full and we have people in custody, they got to go rent beds in another county and then transport them. The cost over the last 2 years has been about $260,000 above the jail budget. These are variable costs that you can't budget for. That's the numbers I got from the sheriff's department. About $260,000.
Now you said over 2 years, so
yeah,
about $130,000 each year.
Yeah, but that's variable. The one of the years was higher than the other.
Sure.
Because they were trying to utilize the bracelet, and now according to the sheriff, the general trend is just higher and higher and higher. So it's going to get worse.
That's nice.
And we're not talking about the jail budget. We're talking about what is above the jail budget. And we're not even talking about mental commitments or juvenile transports or anything like that. So this is just one little narrow slice of pie that we can identify, $260,000. Mm-hmm. So I went back to look at all the people, all the cases that there was a prison sentence on from 2018 to 2019, okay? Mm-hmm. And I calculated the number of days that those individuals sat in custody. And so let's just use an example. Let's say somebody sat 1 year in custody waiting for their case to progress, then they were sentenced and they were sent to prison. It's safe to assume then that if we had a second judge, we would have been able to process that case half as quick. So it would have been 6 months that they were sitting custody. They would have been then sentenced and sent to prison. So that would have saved Sawyer County 6 months of bed days. So when I ran all those numbers and divided by half and then applied it to the out-of-county budget, or the amount of money we spent out of county, we would have eliminated that entire $260,000 spending if we had had a second judge. So for people to say, you know what, we can't afford to build a courthouse, we can't afford a second judge. I don't know how we can continue to afford hundreds of thousands of dollars each year, and it's getting worse going forward, transporting people outside of county, because we have a one judge county and it's a funnel, and you have all of this crime and all these cases that has to go through one courtroom. If we get a second courtroom, it opens up that hourglass and you can process these cases that much quicker, and people are not sitting in custody for extended periods of time while their case is progressing through the system. I mean, if you calculate that $130,000 out over the next 6 years, I mean, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, and how much is it then for? You had said that they would pay for the judge, but is there other staffing that would be needed that the county would have to pay? So are we just looking at the county has to pay for, which I'm not saying that that's not going to be a big amount, and not even necessarily saying they should do it. I have no horse in the race. Whatever they want to do.
And guess. So what I'm saying is that $260,000 or $130,000 a year has to be taken into account when you talk about maybe an additional JA. We've gone to the county and we said, you know what, our JA can work for both judges. our court security officer can be for both courtrooms. So we're talking about, we're doing everything we can to try and eliminate that operating budget as small as possible, and trying to I mean, here's the thing: if you just want to spend $260,000, every 2 years to have people transported in and out of the system, or to a different county, or do you want to use that $260,000 and actually pay for a functioning system that is responsive to the needs of the community? I mean, this isn't a zero-sum game. It's not a situation where we're just going to go further $260,000 into the hole. We're talking about real money that we're saving here. And we're spending money, but we're also saving it on the back end.
Yeah, and if you remove the financial piece of it as well, this also means these individuals, I'm assuming not all of them go to prison, right? The ones that you were just talking about, the year to the 6 months. I mean, that also means that they may be able to, contribute back to society and start their punishment or whatever it is that they're going to have to go through. So they're not sitting there for a year.
That's right.
Well, it seems like it seems like you're taking all of the pieces of, you're just making it very easy, or the easy as you can. You're trying to find every possible way to have the county not say no to this.
It's up to them, and it's up to the people. I get that they still have to build a $3 to $4 million facility, which is going to be basically, they've already spent $20,000 on an architect to give them several different options. $20,000 of the public's money to actually have suggestions as to how to build it. They have the plans. They have the ideas. They just have to basically go through this and decide which one they want to do. The cheapest option is about $3 to $4 million. That's a lot of money, and I get that. But it's going to increase the efficiency of the court system. It's going to make it more responsive to public safety, and it's going to eliminate this bleeding cost of transporting people out of county continually.
John, thank you so much. Thanks for agreeing to do this remotely, and I certainly appreciate it.
So I just want to let people know that they're going to see me in the courtroom. This Zoom is only going to, for me after today, Zoom is really only going to be part of our lifestyle if we start having an outbreak of COVID-19 in Sawyer County. Assuming that we don't, then it's probably going to be using mostly the phone conference bridge. Okay. But even though it's the courthouse is kind of dark in some areas, we're still functioning. We're still operating, albeit not at full capacity, but we're still out there doing the best that we can to process these cases, to keep our community safe, and to do what we need to do. So thank you, everybody, for their support in this difficult time.
Thank you. Special thank you to today's guest, Sawyer County Judge John Yackel, and thank all of you very much for watching. We'll see you right back here tomorrow morning at 8:30 as we'll be joined by Spooner Superintendent Dr. David Aslin. Until tomorrow, stay safe, keep your social distance, and have a blessed day.